The room felt warmer the moment she walked in, not in a dramatic, movie scene way. Just enough that I noticed it, and then immediately told myself I was imagining things. It was late afternoon at the repair shop, that slow hour when the radio plays softer and even the tools sound tired. I was wiping grease off my hands, thinking about nothing in particular, when the bell over the door rang. I didn't look up right away. Customers came and went all day. Shoes scraped the concrete floor. A pause. Then a voice, calm, unhurried. "Hi. I was told you might be able to take a look at this." I looked up then. She stood just inside the doorway, holding a small appliance against her hip like it weighed more than it should. Early 40s, maybe mid-40s. Hair pulled back, but not tightly, like she'd done it without a mirror. No rush in her posture. No apology for taking up space. She wore that kind of confidence that doesn't announce itself, just settles in and waits for the room to catch up. "Yeah," I said too quickly, then slower, correcting myself. "Yeah, sure." She smiled, brief and polite, and set the appliance on the counter. Our fingers didn't touch, but they came close enough that I felt the near miss. I noticed stupid details after that. The faint crease between her eyebrows when she concentrated, the way she washed my hands instead of my face while I examined the damage. "It stopped working last night," she said. "No drama. Just gave up." "That happens," I replied. I don't know why I said it like it was something personal. She laughed softly. Not loud, not nervous, just enough to fill the space for a second. Then silence slid back in, heavier than before. I kept working, aware of her standing there, not scrolling her phone, not pacing, just present. Most people ask how long it'll take. She didn't. She leaned an elbow on the counter, careful not to cross some invisible line, and looked around the shop like she was memorizing it for later. The quiet stretched. I should have said something useful. Instead, I cleared my throat. "You can sit if you want. Might be a bit." "I'm fine," she said. Then, after a beat, "But thank you." That pause, half a second too long, stuck with me. While I worked, she told me about her day without really telling me about her day. Traffic, a meeting that ran late, a coffee she forgot to drink until it was cold. Ordinary things, but the way she spoke, measured, slightly amused, made them sound like she was choosing her words carefully, even when there was no reason to. I nodded, asked questions I didn't usually ask customers. She answered, then asked one back. My name, how long I'd been here. When I said it, she repeated it once, quietly, like she was testing how it sounded. When the appliance finally hummed back to life, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't pride. Relief, maybe, or disappointment that the excuse for her staying was gone. She watched it run, then looked at me. "You're good at this." I shrugged. "It's just fixing things." "Still," she said, "not everyone can." She reached into her bag, then stopped, noticing the grease smudge on my wrist. Without thinking, she grabbed a napkin from the counter and held it out. Her fingers brushed my skin this time, brief, accidental. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did I. "Sorry," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't. "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't really about that. At the door, she turned back once, hand on the frame. "I might come back," she said. "If that's okay." "Yeah," I replied. "Anytime." The bell rang again as she left. The room cooled. Or maybe I just noticed the difference. Hours later, I was still thinking about the way she'd said my name, like it was something she planned to remember. The second time she came in, it was raining. Not heavy, just enough to darken the sidewalk and make people move faster than they meant to. I noticed because she didn't rush. She shook her umbrella outside, folded it neatly, and stepped in like she had all the time she needed. "Hey," she said. Not hi, not my name. Just hey, like we'd already agreed on something. The shop smelled like warm metal and old coffee. I was in the back, half under a work table, when I heard her voice. By the time I stood up, she was already scanning the shelves, hands clasped loosely in front of her. Same posture as before. Careful. Contained. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me," she added. "I did," I said. Too fast again. Then softer. "Yeah, I remember." She smiled, but it didn't stay long. There were faint shadows under her eyes this time, the kind you don't get from one bad night. Her coat was still buttoned, even though it was warm inside. A small thing. Still, I noticed. She had another issue. Something minor, she said. Honestly, it could have waited. I think we both knew that. I pulled up a chair so she could sit while I worked. She hesitated before taking it, like she was measuring the distance, then sat anyway. Crossed her ankles. Hands folded. Always controlled. We didn't talk much at first. The radio hummed low. Rain tapped against the windows. Every so often I'd glance up and catch her watching me. Not my face, really. My hands. Like before. You're very focused, she said suddenly. I laughed under my breath. That's one way to put it. No, I mean, she stopped. Cleared her throat. You don't drift. Most people do. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't. The silence stretched again, but this one felt different. Thinner. Like it might tear if either of us moved wrong. She shifted in her seat. Uncrossed her ankles. Her fingers tapped once against her knee, then stilled when she realized she was doing it. Long day? I asked. She exhaled through her nose. Long week. That was all. But the way she said it, like she was holding something back, made my chest tighten. I watched her hands as she spoke. One ring, simple. No fidgeting with it. Just there. Sometimes, she went on, not looking at me, it's easier to fix things than other stuff. I nodded, pretending I understood more than I did. Yeah. She laughed then. Quiet. A little tired. You're young, she said, almost to herself. I felt that land between us. Not heavy, just present. Does that bother you? I asked before I could stop myself. She looked up, surprised. Held my gaze a second too long. Then she looked away first. No, she said. It just means I should know better. I finished the repair and slid the item back toward her. Our hands touched again. This time neither of us apologized. She didn't pull away immediately. Her fingers were warm. Warmer than I expected. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. She stood, hesitated, then said, "Thank you for taking the time." "Any time," I said, and meant more than the work. At the door, she paused, hand on the handle, and for a moment it felt like she might say something else. Instead, she just looked at me, really looked, and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. The bell rang as she left, but this time, the room didn't cool right away. It happened on a night I wasn't supposed to stay late. The shop had closed an hour ago, lights dimmed to that half-on state that made everything look softer, less real. Outside, the weather had turned strange, wind pushing at the windows, rain tapping in uneven bursts like it couldn't decide what it wanted. I was finishing up paperwork when the bell rang. I knew it was her before I looked. She stood there damp around the edges, hair slightly undone, coat unbuttoned this time. She didn't apologize for coming late. She never did. She just looked at me like she'd already weighed whether she should be here, and lost. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she said. "It's fine," I replied. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. She didn't have anything to fix. She admitted that after a moment, eyes flicking to the workbench, then back to me. "I was nearby," she said. Then, quieter, and I didn't want to go home yet. I offered coffee. She declined, then changed her mind. We stood too close while it brewed, the small space making it hard not to notice things. The way she smelled faintly like rain and something citrusy. The way she wrapped her hands around the mug like she needed the warmth. We sat at the back table, not across from each other, side by side. Our knees almost touched. Almost. She talked more than usual. About her day. About a project that wasn't going the way she'd hoped. She laughed once, then stopped herself, like she'd remembered where she was. "You ever get the feeling," she said, staring into her coffee, "that you're standing in the wrong part of your own life?" I swallowed. Yeah. She glanced at me then. Held it. There was something open in her expression I hadn't seen before. Vulnerable. Brief. "I shouldn't be saying things like that," she added. "You don't have to stop," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Before she could respond, her phone lit up on the table. The name on the screen made her shoulders stiffen. She didn't pick it up right away. Let it ring once. Twice. "I'm sorry," she muttered, grabbing it and stepping a few feet away. I turned my attention to the window, watched rain slide down the glass. Her voice dropped, tense. Fragments reached me. "Now's not a good time." A pause. I said I can't. When she came back, something had closed again. Not fully, but enough. Everything okay? I asked. She nodded. Too fast. Yeah, just life. We sat in silence after that. The coffee went untouched. The wind rattled the door. At one point, her hand slid closer on the table. Not intentional. Or maybe it was. I didn't move mine. I told myself that was restraint. Or maybe fear. I should go, she said eventually, though she didn't stand. I turned toward her. Our faces were closer than I realized. I could see the tiredness in her eyes now. The question she wasn't asking. I lifted my hand, not all the way, just enough that she noticed. She looked at it, then at me. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then the bell over the door chimed as the wind pushed it slightly open, and the moment broke. We didn't plan to talk about it. That's the part that still gets me. There was no announcement, no lead-in. Just the weight of everything we'd been circling finally settling between us. Heavy enough that pretending became harder than speaking. It was early evening, not late enough to excuse the quiet. The shop door was open, letting in air that smelled like dust and something burnt from the street outside. She stood near the counter, not sitting this time, coat draped over her arm like she might leave any second. You've been quiet, she said. So have you. She nodded. A small acknowledgement, not a defense. We stood there for a while. I leaned against the counter. She traced a line in the dust with her finger, erased it, then did it again. Watching her hands had become a habit I didn't question anymore. This doesn't feel, she stopped. Pressed her lips together. Tried again. It doesn't feel accidental anymore. My chest tightened. I could have joked. Could have shrugged it off. Instead, I asked, is that a problem? She looked at me then. Really looked. The kind of look that makes you feel exposed even when you're not doing anything wrong. I don't know, she said. That's the problem. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was deliberate, like we were both giving the truth room to breathe. I come here, she went on, quieter now, and I tell myself it's nothing. Just a place. Just someone being kind. Her fingers curled into the fabric of her coat. But then I leave, and it follows me. I didn't interrupt. I was afraid if I did, I'd ruin whatever fragile honesty she'd stepped into. You don't ask for anything, she said. You don't push. And somehow that makes it worse. I laughed once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because it landed too close. I don't know what I'm allowed to ask for. That made her flinch. Just slightly. Like she hadn't expected that part. She took a step closer. Not enough to touch. Enough that I felt it anyway. The air between us felt charged, like before a storm when everything goes still. We can't keep pretending this is normal, she said. No, I agreed. My voice sounded unfamiliar to me. It hasn't been for a while. Her eyes dropped to the floor, then back up. I don't want to hurt you. That sentence did more damage than any confession could have. I know, I said, and I meant it. She shook her head, frustrated. You say that like it makes it okay. I say it because it's true. Another pause. Longer this time. Her breathing was shallow. Mine too. She reached out, then stopped herself. Her hand hovered there, undecided, before falling back to her side. I'm standing in a place I don't recognize, she whispered. And I don't know if you're the reason, or just the proof. I wanted to close the distance. Wanted to tell her I could handle whatever this was. Instead, I stayed where I was. Let the space remain honest. She picked up her coat. Didn't put it on. I need to leave before I forget why I shouldn't stay, she said. At the door, she turned once more. Her eyes were wet, but steady. If I were braver, she said softly, this would already be something. Then she left, and for the first time, the silence didn't follow her out. It stayed with me. She didn't come in for a week. That shouldn't have meant anything. People disappear all the time. Lives keep moving. Still, I caught myself listening for the bell more than I should have. I left the front light on longer than usual, like the room might remember what to do if she walked back in. When she finally did, it wasn't alone. She stood just inside the door, holding her phone like it weighed something. Her face looked the same at first glance, but there was a tightness around her mouth I hadn't seen before. She didn't smile. Do you have a minute? She asked. I nodded and flipped the sign to closed without asking why. She noticed. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, like she'd been holding them up all day. We sat at the back table again. Same chairs, same distance, different air. She placed her phone between us, screen down. Her fingers rested on it for a moment before she pulled them back, folded her hands together, then unfolded them again. I didn't tell you something, she said. I waited. My husband died, she added. Not dramatically, just placed there. Like a fact she was tired of carrying alone. I felt my chest shift, like something had been rearranged without warning. I'm sorry, I said, and hated how small it sounded. So am I, she replied, then corrected herself. I mean, I am, but not in the way people expect. She picked up the phone, turned it over, and tapped the screen. A voicemail began to play. A man's voice, older than mine, warm and familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He was talking about nothing important. Groceries. Being late. Ending with, call me when you get this. She stopped it before it finished. That was the last one, she said. I've never deleted it. I didn't know where to look. At her. At the table. Anywhere but the phone. I don't come here because of you, she said carefully. At least, that's what I tell myself. I stayed quiet. You listen the way he did, she went on. Not with your face. With your stillness. She shook her head, almost angry at herself. I didn't notice it at first. Then I couldn't stop. That landed harder than I expected. Not flattering. Not comforting. Just real. I'm not him, I said gently. Not as a boundary. As a truth. I know, she replied immediately. That's the problem. Her eyes were wet now, but she didn't wipe them. She held herself together like she'd practiced. I think I've been borrowing you, she said. Without asking. The word borrowing echoed in me. Temporary. Careful. Already aware of an end. I don't feel borrowed, I said, before I could think better of it. She looked at me then. Something cracked. Not fully. Just enough to let something honest through. That scares me, she whispered. We sat there after that. No touching. No fixing. Just the hum of the lights and the weight of what had shifted. When she stood to leave, she hesitated, then did something small that felt enormous. She slid the phone toward me, just an inch. Can you listen? She asked. I nodded. She didn't stay to see me press play. But when I did, and the voice filled the room again, I realized the shift wasn't that she'd let me closer. It was that she'd finally shown me what stood between us. It didn't arrive all at once. No rush. No speech. Just a slow settling, like dust after something breaks and no one moves right away. She came back on a morning that felt unfinished. Gray light. No rain yet. The kind of quiet that makes even small sounds feel loud. I was restocking shelves when the bell rang. I didn't look up immediately this time. I didn't need to. I wasn't sure if you'd be here, she said. I usually am, I replied. She stepped closer. No coat today. Just a sweater she kept tugging at, like she wasn't sure where to put her hands. I noticed she looked less tired. Or maybe just more honest. I listened, I said. She nodded. I figured. We stood there, not rushing into the back, not pretending there was work to do. The shop felt smaller than usual. Or maybe we were just finally standing in the same place. I don't want to confuse you, she said. Or use you as a soft place to land. I know, I said. After a beat. I don't want to disappear just because this is complicated. That made her close her eyes for a second. Not in relief. In recognition. I don't know what this is, she said. But I know what it isn't. She looked at me. It isn't nothing. No, I said quietly. It hasn't been for a while. We sat at the back table again. Not close at first. Just enough to share the space without testing it. She talked about him, briefly this time. Not the loss. The life. The way he used to hum when he was distracted. I listened. I didn't feel like I was competing with a memory. Just witnessing it. I don't want to replace anything, I said. She smiled, small and tired. I don't want you to. Another pause. Comfortable this time. Earned. When the light shifted through the window, she leaned back, exhaled. I keep thinking there should be rules, she said. But all I can find is honesty. That's not nothing, I said. She reached for her mug, missed the handle slightly, laughed at herself. I didn't think. I just steadied it. My hand touched hers. No jolt. No pulling away. Just contact that stayed. She didn't look down at it. She looked at me. This doesn't fix everything, she said. I know. It might make some things harder. I know that too. She nodded. Let her forehead rest against mine. Just for a second. Not a kiss. Not a promise. Something quieter. Something truer. We stayed like that, breathing the same air, until the moment felt complete enough to release. When she stood to leave, she didn't hesitate at the door. I'll see you, she said. Not asking. Yeah, I replied. You will. After she left, the room felt exactly the same. Same light. Same hum. Same silence. Only now it fit. I'm telling this from a different place than where it started. Not just time, though time helps, but from a quieter version of myself. The kind that doesn't rush to explain things anymore. The kind that knows some connections don't need labels to be real. She still comes by the shop. Not every day. Not on a schedule. Sometimes it's to fix something. Sometimes it's just coffee, brought from the place down the street because she remembered I never drink the one from the machine. We don't pretend it's accidental anymore. We also don't announce it. What changed first was me. I stopped mistaking attention for intention. Stopped filling silences with hope. I learned how to sit with what was actually there instead of what I wanted it to become. I learned that restraint isn't absence. It's care, practiced daily. With her, the change was slower. More internal. She started standing differently. Less like she was ready to leave at any second. She laughed more freely, not the tired kind that ended too quickly. Sometimes she talked about the past without lowering her voice. Sometimes she didn't talk at all, and let that be enough. We never made big promises. We didn't need to. The honesty became the structure. If something felt heavy, we named it. If something felt good, we didn't apologize for it. There were still hard days. Days when she pulled back. Days when I wondered if I was just a chapter she needed to survive. But the difference was, I didn't disappear inside those thoughts anymore. I stayed present. With her. With myself. Love, I learned, doesn't always arrive as fire. Sometimes it's a quiet decision made over and over again not to look away. Sometimes it's letting someone be unfinished in front of you without trying to fix the shape of them. Sometimes it's understanding that timing isn't an enemy. It's a teacher. We never crossed some invisible line that turned everything simple. Instead, we built something that fit the lives we actually had. Careful, warm, human. Every once in a while, I still think about the first day she walked in. The way the room felt warmer without explanation. Back then, I thought it was chemistry. Or luck. Or maybe just my imagination. Now I think it was recognition. Not of who we would be to each other, but of who we were allowed to become in the presence of someone who really sees you. And that kind of connection doesn't fade when the story ends. It just settles into something you carry. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?